Hello, this is Levi Wampler with MMAStrikingCoach.com. Today we're speaking with Jim McCann of Extreme Freestyle. He is the founder of Extreme Freestyle Combat Sports, founder and promoter of American Mixed Martial Arts Fight League. I'm not going to read all your stuff here on your website, but
yeah.
One quick question. I mean, he just got a list as long as your arm of qualifications here. Certified boxing coach, trained under Mark Hatmaker. He wrote and starred in Jim McCann's Art of Boxing DVD training series, also Ground the Pound DVD training series, and Fire and Brimstone DVD training series. So you've done a lot of stuff.
Oh, no doubt. And that's not all of it, brother. We got rid of some of it. We took some of it off the market. You know, you go around and you grow in the martial arts and you change your perspective on some things. I said, well, shit, you know, I changed my mind on how I presented that, so I want to go back and readdress it. So there's a handful of ones that are no longer even on the market, you know. Amazingly enough, and I got more. I'm filming some more in a couple weeks here.
Well, could you tell us how you got started in martial arts?
Yeah, from the beginning, the very beginning.
Yeah, tell the story.
In the very beginning, back in when I was a little kid, you know, I started with judo at the local YMCA, and I had no idea other than maybe some, you know, kung fu movies or what the heck was going on, and went and did it. I don't really remember much about the class, quite honestly. I remember having to come up with like $20 back in the day and make whatever it was, you know, 1970 or so, long time ago. Whatever the date was, and it was like $20, and you know, had to ask my parents for $20, and they, you know, which is a lot of money back in the day, and they paid the $20 for the gi, and the coach collected it from all the kids in class and disappeared and never took judo again. You know, but I loved it, and my dad said I'll never do it again. That shit, it's garbage. You know, and I never stopped doing it, and that I always found some way to kind of do it, and you know, I went through the basic traditional martial arts from school to school throughout the years, and you know, really. It wasn't my cup of tea, and I was very fortunate early on in my life, as Tim Tackett will say, have a good bullshit meter. I didn't buy into necessarily what the instructor was telling me. Oftentimes they tell us things that they've just been, it's dogma, you know, rather than, you know, real research and understanding. Well, we've always done it this way. It doesn't matter, and you just have to do it this way. And I was like, well, I don't get it. My body doesn't work that way. And so early on I realized that. And quite often I did a lot of self-study and exploration, you know, to kind of just get me to wherever the hell it is I am now.
Now, with everything that you've done, we'd kind of like to hone in a little bit on maybe boxing and maybe a little bit of kickboxing.
Phenomenal. All right.
Would you explain to us maybe the way you think it's best to practice boxing for MMA?
The best way, first of all, is just to really just plain old do boxing from the get-go. Often you see a lot of guys teaching boxing out there, or guys who are practicing boxing with no real breadth and depth of the topic at hand. I get that not everything will translate from boxing to MMA, but let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. You know, boxing is phenomenal hands. Arguably, there's no better hands out there in any sort of martial art or discipline. So why are we throwing, you know, looping it into one thing, saying, well, you just don't want to box just like that? There's a lot of real good things in there. And of course, you have to, you know, shape it toward the martial arts. But, you know, I do believe that in and of itself, just starting off with plain old boxing, learning how to throw a jab, across hook, understanding that distance, that timing, the tempo, the cadence, all those wonderful things that you get from standing in front of another guy, you know, throwing punches at you, which you won't get there if you just kind of dumb it down to some basic BS, you know, kindergarten level understanding of how to throw your hands.
Mm-hmm. So your advice for people trying to learn how to use boxing in the ring is to go back and just actually box, learn. Isn't that revolutionary? Just go back and just do some boxing. And, of course, we'll make those appropriate changes. But, you know, to have that great understanding of how to throw and how to use your body appropriately in all facets, you know, of boxing is pretty important. You know, at the end of the day, you know, more victories are won by good hands in MMA than or in submission, and it leads up to the submission when you hit a guy, you dummies him up, of course, and allows you to submit him at a greater level. You know, Mark Hatmaker did a tremendous
study on this a couple of years ago, and I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but he broke it down by how to set up with the ground and pound and the punches. Pure submission in and of itself without being set up with ground and pound in MMA is few and far between. And so to have the hands and be able to use them effectively is certainly very important.
Now, you mentioned, we learn our boxing, we do our fundamentals, nothing revolutionary, but then when we go to MMA, we do need to change it. Could you tell us a little bit about what the changes are?
Yeah, well, essentially, obviously you're not going to be, you have to be much more aware of the shoot, leg kicks, all those other facets that come out. Of course, with kickboxing, you'd be attuned to it, but that level change to clinch, so good learning how to have some good inside fighting, being able to tie up for, locking onto head, zoning out on angles, nailing to the body, use of your elbows and your knees on the inside, and by the way, and even on the outside, is pretty important. You have to be, probably a little bit wider stance, a little bit lower. Your hands don't need to be up near your jaw necessarily in that facet. They can be a little bit out. I also even train my guys leave the hands open, not even to really make a fist. That allows you to be more loosens up the muscles, allows you to be a little more explosive in your shots. It also allows you to grab things quicker rate than if your hands are locked and intensed up. Not to mention it wastes a lot of energy, unnecessary energy, which you can't afford that when you're in the octagon on any level. So
now, when people are taking say they've been doing their boxing or their kickboxing or their more traditional strict regimens, and they want to make that transition to MMA, what would you say is, trainer and a promoter are the mistakes that you see people making?
I'm sorry, you cut out, Levi. I missed part of that question.
No, it's no problem. So we've got bad storms going on up here, so yeah, my phone's kind of off.
Yeah, I got
you. When you're training your boxing, so you've done your fundamentals, you've really trained your boxing or your kickboxing either way, and now you're transitioning to MMA. What are some good ways for them to practice for the things that you talked about, like the shooting and everything else?
Well, having a good trainer, use of pads. Often, I have guys, when I'm using the pads, I'm constantly changing. For example, I'd be out holding the pads for your jab, cross hook. All of a sudden, you throw a right hand. I fall to the ground. You jump on top of me, continue the striking, or then a submission on the ground from there. Maybe in the midst of the pad holding, I'll throw a kick, or I go to shoot, or I go for a clinch and hold you up against the wall, force you to work your way out of it and fight in dirty boxing, and always seeking that opening. When I tell my fighters when they're fighting is that any time that there's nothing between my fist and your face, I need to introduce the two. Yeah, as often as possible in that fight. Whether it's a back fist, a hammer fist, an inside hammer fist, you name the shot. You need to be able to execute that from every angle in both stances, left and right, standing, kneeling, and on the ground. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's where your boxing needs to be explored out into a wider variety of areas. You can't just be only being able to fight in the left lead. You need to be able to fight in the right lead. You got to be able to fight in a crouch, with one arm tied up. Often, hey, watch a hockey event, and tie the guy, hold onto his neck in the back of his head, uppercut him. Ali did it quite frequently, but he somehow got away with it, which is illegal in standard boxing, but phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal for MMA.
So you're doing a promotion now. So when you see people coming in, what kind of mistakes do they often make? Just not
real. I tell you what. Yeah, the biggest mistake of a guy who's striking is doesn't have a real understanding of distance. I don't know if you've ever done much with understanding the distance with some JKD guys or attack it or something like that, but often distance, that's the thing that allows you to execute your attack, get away safely, and having that full understanding of it. We call it the fighting measure, and often I see fighters just march in toe-to-toe and like rock'em sock'em robots just wail away, or they let that wrestler come inside of them and just shoot or get in the clinch. If they had a better understanding of the distance, they would be able to execute more effectively. And then right after that distance and excuse me, the execution of distance is your ability to time things. There's all different levels of timing. It gets pretty in depth, but if you don't have a good sense of timing and how you use that, it'll certainly become an issue. There's such things like counter time. There's rhythm, cadence, tempo. All are just little breakdowns of how to manipulate that distance. That timing. And when you're able to manipulate that timing, you're able to hit on what is called hitting them between the notes. hitting them when their mind is somewhere else. If I throw a feint at you, Levi, and you react to it, then you open up somewhere else, right? Or if I move a distance, I make you miss a shot, whether it be a shoot or a punch or a kick, your mind is often focused on, shit, I missed that. And in that moment while your mind's on that, oh, shit, I missed, that is the perfect opportunity for me to attack. So often guys don't capitalize on that either, the appropriate time to counter. They try to shoehorn in a technique, whether it be a punch or a kick, at the inappropriate time, hence them being taken down to the ground and then, dominated potentially,
That's really important, like I say, the training the distance. We've had some other instructors talk about making sure you're training at the right distance, but haven't really had anybody talk about timing too much yet.
Well, hey, Tom, at the end of the day, I'm an old man now, and I spar. Right now, I am over 1,800 full contact rounds of sparring this year.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's trying to quote. That is MMA, and that is boxing, between 2 and 5 minute rounds. Now, I'm fighting guys from beginner who don't know shit to guys who are a couple of guys who I just fight this past weekend in Ring of Combat in Atlantic City. So a wide variety of skills. But the essence of what allows me to be able to do that many rounds is I have a real good sense of timing. I'm able to just move, hopefully, just enough so I don't take the full brunt of a shot or a takedown. And it's about timing. Timing allows, if you have superior timing, you can outdo a faster opponent. The speed is more than just your ability to throw a punch fastly, your initiation speed. It's broken down in much more wide variety of categories, but having that good sense of timing is essential. And part of that timing is, and understanding that speed comes in. I don't know if anyone's had this discussion with you, but there's different levels of how to break that down. There's a perceptual speed, which where my timing starts. My ability to see, something happening. You are moving toward me. You're moving away. Maybe you're starting to throw a punch, and then my mental speed is my ability to go, oh shit, Levi's throwing a big overhand right, and I'm able to digest it. You kind of I saw the punch coming, but I couldn't do nothing about it. My ability to recognize danger or to see an opening and take the appropriate action. Then there's initiation speed, which is my ability to actually throw a punch or a kick or to move out of the way. And then there's the performance speed, the amount of time it actually takes me to do that. And then what's called alteration speed, which is my ability to change my attack or my defense in an instant to go to a different place to allow it to be effective. Not unlike, quarterback on the front line calling an audible. When he sees the defense doing something else, all of a sudden he changes the plan in the last second. That's kind of what alteration speed would be. So all that happens in 1 second, under a second. And then my ability to execute all that is a whole other thing. We do a lot of work with bridging, making that highway in your brain to be able to make those decisions at a greater rate of speed. Now, it doesn't mean the guy still won't beat the shit out of you, but we certainly do try to work on all those aspects,
Mm-hmm.
Have I lost you, Levi?
No, you're good. You're good. Good points. I was just listening. Now, could you tell us some of your favorite training materials or resources? Just any book, DVD, workout equipment that you think all fighters should know about?
I love going back and reading old books on boxing, grappling, and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, they're often very incomplete. Matter of fact, as I'm talking to you right now, and I looked at the book the other day, and it's right here on my shelf. It's a book by Jim Corbett, and it was a book. James Corbett, it was, written in, what year, like 1912 or something like that on boxing. It's pretty funny to see the guys in their Speedos, doing some boxing, their technique. It's pretty bad. The book's, it was written for the time. But nowadays, quite honestly, a lot of, I watch a lot of the fights and I try to break them down and understand what these guys are doing successfully, what they're doing wrong. A guy, by the way, could be a phenomenal fighter and have have terrible technique. He can just kick everyone's ass. There's a lot of guys out there. They're just different animals. But as far as books and resources go, commentaries on the Martial Way by Bruce Lee, phenomenal book. Some of Tim Tackett's books on Jeet Kune Do kickboxing and stuff like that. Just break down some of these little idiosyncrasies that often are neglected in training. Hat maker stuff is phenomenal. I've known Mark for 8-9 years, and I have seen and purchased every book and every DVD he's got, and it's exhausting. I can't keep up with the man. He's exhausting me. He just he covers it in such in depth that I just go, I tap out. I've had enough. It's too much for me, But I'm always looking. You go online, and often you find after a while, that you'll find that essence of truth or that essence of combat that flows through a lot of these books. A lot of these books will have some real good truths and stuff, and often sometimes heck they make a right hand turn somewhere and you go, oof, where'd they go wrong in that scenario? But once you read it, there's a few things you can pick up, and then your ability, of course, put it into your own training is essential. Not just to read it and regurgitate it, but to express the technique and the thought processes behind the technique versus you just emulating the technique,
Right, it's a completely different thing just between being able to do it or look like you're doing it and actually doing it in combat.
Oh, totally different. There are a lot of guys what we call pad warriors. And these guys coming in, they hit the bags and they got the look and they got all the right gear on. They got the cool shirt and shorts and the best gloves out there. And then when they go to do a spar or do anything else at any level, it all falls apart. Mike Tyson says it best. Every man's got to play until gets hit. It all goes out the window. So. There's certainly a difference. And then, of course, in reality, just as I was saying, just emulating, but having that, greater understanding of why you're doing something. I encourage my students, the guys they train, to ask the questions. I want them, not only do I, as instructor, should have a breadth and depth of the topics at hand. If I don't, I should have someone there who can, the who, what, where, how, and why something happens. And as I'm teaching you to do something, I want you to know, hey, this is why we do something. This is why we move it this way. And this is why. And if you do it this way, well, these are the things, A, B, C, and D, that he is most likely going to do to counter that. And these are the things that you do to stop him from doing that. It doesn't need to go past 3 or 5, because after that, it becomes a Jackie Chan movie and doesn't really exist, And then as a coach, you got to lay it down in a structured, logical progression so they can understand it. You've got to be able to communicate it effectively. All those kind of come into play when I teach these guys and how they do that. Often I've trained with guys, and I've been out there and I've been students of guys who are really good sometimes at even just doing the technique. Hey, let me show you how quick and fast I am. Bap, bap, bap. Ain't that cool? Well, what does that mean to me or you? How does that make me a better fighter because you can do it fast? I need you to break it down for me. And as a coach, you have to be able to find out what makes every fighter tick and what his strengths or her strengths and weaknesses are, and manipulate them to the best of their advantage and help them explore new opportunities to help them get to that next level and get them to where they didn't think they could be, potentially by exposing some of these things. When you see it, Mike, there's a great, I don't know if I quote it correctly, but Michelangelo had said, he says, every block of stone it has a statue in it, and it's a task of the sculpture to discover it. So when he was asked about the statue of Michael, they said, how did you know how to make Michael? And he goes, I just chipped away what wasn't Michael. I thought that was pretty, wow, I get it. Instead of adding all this stuff on top of technique and drill on top of drill, let's get rid of all that non-essential BS and find out what really you can do as a fighter,
Yeah, no, it's true. Just stick to what works. You don't need all the extra.
No, you don't need all the extra bullshit, yeah.
So could you share with us some of the best advice your mentors have ever given you about anything? Just advice you think everybody should know?
The best advice they've ever given me, anything to, God, that's probably good. I don't know if there was any one thing, but it was really more about that self-discovery, be an innovator versus being a replicator, and kind of doing. Of course, you got to listen and look at things like, as I said, Tackett talked about having a good bullshit meter, know when someone's giving you bullshit or not on a technique. It wasn't necessarily about working harder or stuff. It was just having a good, being true to yourself, and expressing what's in you in that technique. That sounds a little esoteric, a little crazy kung fu stuff, but it's ultimately, it is ultimately the truth. When you're training, I've trained for 40 years. And someone goes, well, gee, Jim, God forbid, people actually think I know what I'm doing. But, and the truth is, I just showed up every day, Levi. I never not showed up. I trained almost every single day doing something, and it never ended. Now, if I just had a hurt muscle in my right leg for like 2 months, you know what? I showed up and trained every day. I basically was fighting like a flamingo in the ring. You know, I just worked around it. A couple years ago, one of my guys, a second-degree judo player, he threw me. My groin got torn. Mark Hatmaker came up the next day to do a seminar. I was at the seminar. I couldn't put someone in my guard for a year. Oh, but I still was on the mat wrestling, never stopped. You know, I had cancer in my back, right? I had it ripped out. Hours out of being out of the operating room, I was sparring. It just didn't stop me. It's not that I have such I breathe this. I love it, you know, to do this stuff and get me to wherever it is I want to go. That's the key, is just showing up and doing it, you know, and dare to be as great as you can be at whatever level it might be. That was the best. You know, how many times guys come to my gym, if I had a goddamn penny for every guy who said he wanted to fight, I'll be here tomorrow at 5 o'clock, man. Well, I'm there at 4:30, man. I ain't getting paid to be there at 4:30, and I get the call at 9 o'clock in the morning. Oh, man, I slept in. You know, they're just not showing up, not doing what it takes, you know. You got to do it. You got to want it more than you got to want to be great more than you want to breathe. And when you want to be, so if you want it that bad, where it is like your next breath, then that guy will be that fighter and stuff like that. And doing the right, not just talking about it. Geez, I'm not going to mention name, but I had a guy fight in my league not long ago, and this guy really loved himself. It was the ego was incredible, you know. And I don't know if the effort was there, but the ego. So he certainly believed that he was the next Muhammad Ali. You know, you don't want to be delusional about it, you know, but certainly believe in yourself and just show up. Just show up, good, bad, or indifferent, you know, and open-minded, willing to learn, you know, and put your best foot forth. And knowing too, by the way, not every day you're gonna have a great day in that gym. Some days you go in there, you get the shit kicked out of you by people you should be kicking the shit out of, or you're just not feeling great, or life has just got you down. But you just show up. You do it one more time, you know?
That's some really good advice you have there. I mean, ask for one, I got a bunch, which is good. That's great. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I can talk, man.
No worries. That's what I need. So,
yeah, I can imagine some interviews could be yes, no. That's great. I'm trying to do a fucking interview here. How about shedding the light on the question, right?
All right, well, we've been speaking with Jim McCann. You can find out more about him at that website, extremefreestyle.com, and I'll have a link up below here. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Hey, terrific. Thank you.
Okay, bye.